Hey guys, Frosty Knives here with another book review. And today we're going to be reviewing the brand new Stephen King book, Finders Keepers, which is the sequel to Mr. Mercedes and the second book in what is supposed to be a trilogy. I just finished this book. Here's the hardcover. First edition. We got the title and some nice, there's a notebook dripping with blood. On the back you've got a tree that the notebooks were buried under and more dripping with blood. This book clocks in at 431 pages, so it's a nice, tight horror novel. And I'm not going to give you a synopsis like I normally do, because it's new and it could be some spoilers, but what I will do is I will read the description on the inside of the jacket, so you get an idea of what it's about. Wake up, genius. So begins King's instantly riveting story about a vengeful reader. The genius is John Rothstein, an iconic author who created a famously beloved character named Jimmy Gold, but who hasn't published a book for decades. Morris Bellamy is livid, not just because Rothstein has stopped providing books, but because the nonconformist Jimmy Gold sold out for a career in advertising. Morris kills Rothstein and empties his safe of cash, but the real treasure is a trove of notebooks containing at least one more Gold novel. Morris hides the money and the notebooks under the tree, and then he's locked away in a high-security prison for a different crime. Decades later, a young teen named Pete Albers, whose father was injured in the Mr. Mercedes killings, finds the treasure. And now it is Pete and his family whom Bill Hodges, Holly Gibney, and Jerome Robinson must rescue from an ever more deranged and vengeful Morris when he is released from prison after 35 years. And wants his money and his notebooks back. So this is another hard crime cat and mouse game, very similar to Mr. Mercedes. So let's talk about what I liked about the book and maybe what I didn't like. And what I didn't like, this is a couple of nitpicks. Fans of Misery are going to draw lots of parallels between Misery and Finders Keepers. Morris Bellamy is very, very much a male Annie Wilkes. Both of them are obsessed with a fictional character. Jimmy Gold in this book and Misery Chastain in the Misery books. And then both of them take it to a whole new level where, Annie finds Paul Sheldon injured. I mean, she doesn't actively go out and kidnap him, but she finds him injured. She realizes who he is, and then she holds him hostage and forces him to write more and attempts to kill him at the end of the book when, he basically tortures the Misery book. Morris is so pissed off about what John Rothstein wrote, he goes into the dude's house, kills him, and he kills him, and he doesn't even want the money. He wants the writing. He wants the notebooks. He's upset, not that he stopped writing, he's upset that Jimmy Gold isn't the character that he thought he was. And, Stephen King has done this a lot of times. He's written about, stories about people who have become so obsessed with fiction and with the writers that they go into these neurotic, crazy things. So this is another one of those books. Now, the interesting parallel in this book is that Morris Bellamy and Pete Albers are almost identical. They're yin and yang. They're exact opposites, but they're identical. They both live in the same house, which is ironic. They both grow up in the same house. They both love John Rothstein. They both think that John Rothstein has changed their lives. They both love the character of Jimmy Gold. The only difference is that Morris Bellamy, is a murderer, and he takes it to that level, and Pete Albers takes it to a different level where he just wants to, he wants to read the books. He wants to just sort of keep it for himself and just read it. He doesn't actively kill anybody, but they're two sides of the same coin. which I thought was an interesting thing. If you liked Mr. Mercedes and you like Stephen King's non-horror books, you'll like this. I thought this was a good read. This could have been done. This could have been done without the tie-in to Mr. Mercedes. If you took out Bill Hodges and Holly and Jerome, and you took out the parts with Brady Hartsfield, I mean, this is a standalone book. It doesn't ever really feel like it's kind of shoehorned into being a Mr. Mercedes sequel, but it doesn't need to be. It stands on its own. The story stands on its own. The story of Morris Bellamy and Pete Albers and Andrew Halliday, that all stands on their own. It's a good story without the Mr. Mercedes tie-in. Not that that's a bad thing for the book. Not that it detracts from the book. But, you know, this could have stood on its own without the tie-in. I'm not going to tell you how the book ends, but when you read it and you get to the ending, there's even more misery comparisons, because Annie Wilkes, the showdown between Morris Bellamy and Pete Albers almost identically mirrors the showdown between Annie Wilkes and Paul Sheldon. So, and that's not to say that this is a ripoff of Misery, but, you know, this book really couldn't have ended any other way, just like Misery really couldn't have ended any other way. If you read it, you'll understand it. One sort of complaint that I might have of it is, during the book, Bill Hodges goes and visits Brady Hartsfield in the hospital. Now, if you remember, Brady Hartsfield is the Mercedes killer, and at this point, he's been in the hospital for like 6 years. He's a vegetable. He was in a coma. He came out of a coma, but he's basically a vegetable. He can kind of talk. He doesn't walk. He doesn't eat. He sits in the chair. He got conked on the head, and he had all that stuff. So, but what's interesting is that it's very, very highly insinuated in the book that because Brady got conked on the head and was in a coma and all that, it's very highly insinuated that he now has psychic powers. It's insinuated that he can do things with his mind now, turn things on and off, move things with his mind, that he's developed powers. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just, I'm kind of saddened that Stephen King fell back onto his supernatural crutch. I really liked Mr. Mercedes, and I really liked Finders Keepers, mainly because there is no horror in it. There's no supernatural. It's just, the horror is all man-made. It's about people doing evil things to other people. There's no ghosts and boogies and whatever. And to see that possibly the last book in the trilogy is going to somehow revolve maybe around Brady having powers, I don't know how it's going to play out, but if the third book has him with some sort of supernatural psychic powers, it's a crutch that King falls back on time and time again. He can't get away from the horror or the supernatural or things like that, and it would have been nice if that wasn't in the book. It would have been nice if he had introduced that, but we have it, and, it doesn't really detract from the book, but we kind of just read it and we go, oh, okay, he fell back on that crutch again, whatever. And I'm sure the last book will probably be fine. Last book may even be a horror book at this rate. Who knows how that's going to turn out. But, that's kind of my only complaint, is that I was a little disappointed that he went back in the box and he pulled out an old crutch and said, let's give this guy supernatural powers. Let's insinuate that he has, psychic powers now because he got conked on the head. Now all these little kids are going to go around conking each other on the head, hoping that they can move shit with their minds. But overall, it's a good story. It's a good read. It's an easy read. If you liked Mr. Mercedes, if you like Stephen King's non-horror books, if you like crime novels, you'll like this. It's not particularly gory. It's not particularly vulgar. So it's a good crime novel. It's a good book. I give it a 4 out of 5. I'm gonna knock a number off because of the whole supernatural element at the end. But still, I would highly recommend reading this. It's a quick read. And if you like to see what the folks from Mr. Mercedes are up to now, well, they're still doing their thing. And now we wait for the third book. So there's my review of Finders Keepers, the latest Stephen King. And as always, keep reading, and I will catch you in the next video.